You're listening to Forge Theater Labs.
Where does that idea come from?
A podcast devoted to exploring theater history.
Is anything that original?
Concepts in storytelling.
Isn't that just an assumption?
And the creation of theater from behind the scenes.
How do they even do that?
This is Forge Theater Labs.
History, innovation, perspective.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Josh from Forge Theater Labs, and I am so excited today to have Leland Faulkner on the podcast. Leland Faulkner is a director, performer, and creator with over 3 decades of experience in film, television, and theater. A member of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, he served as the artistic director of Celebration Barn Theater for 4 years and holds a degree in motion picture studies from the Brooks Institute in Santa Barbara. His work has earned numerous awards across disciplines, including 2 Kennedy Center accolades for directing and technology. Leland began his career apprenticing with the legendary Tony Montanaro, eventually touring internationally as his partner. Since then, he has developed and directed original work for a wide range of performers, mimes, vaudevillians, storytellers, and more, with credits that include ensemble shadow theater and main stage productions like One Man, Two Governors with the St. Louis Repertory Theater. In addition to his stage work, Leland has an accomplished media career. He has produced and edited news magazines and documentaries for City TV 18, earned a Cine Eagle for his short As Luck Would Have It, and won the Maine film competition with his digital film King O' Cats. Most recently, he's been teaching students to craft silent films with comic and physical narratives through the Very Physical Comedy Institute. Whether on stage or screen, Leland thrives on creating bold, character-driven stories and helping others to do the same. Welcome, Leland.
Wow. Thank you, Joshua. 30 years. It just doesn't feel like it's been 30 years of touring and performing, but I guess it has.
Never feels that much, right? Like it never feels, time goes so quick in theater. Which I guess, in this retrospect, I would ask you, how did you first fall in love with theater? Like, what was your first introduction to theater?
My first introduction to theater was as an altar boy, of course, in the Catholic Church, which is, one of the most theatrical forums there ever has been, I think. And I would wake the audience up at communion time with my bell and perform my role as an altar boy. But also I got a chance to experience an amazing thing at the Catholic Church where I was. It wasn't Catholic; it was an Anglican church in Tanzania, East Africa. My mother was a staunch Catholic, but the only church nearby was the Anglican one, which was close to our house, and that was an amazing experience. As a boy, I remember that they staged the play Barabbas, which is about a thief who was also crucified and then released next to Jesus. And they actually, they put up a cross in the middle of the church with a live person on it, and they had all this choreography, and they had chorus, and they had all these elements. And that stuck with me.
So many of us, right? Sorry to interrupt. Like, I absolutely agree. So many of us, our first experience with theater, even though it seems like that theater and church are often at odds with each other, is church. That was my first role ever. I played Jesus, had cotton balls for the beard, right? Had the long hair wig and, did the crucifixion scene. That was my first exposure to acting. It was a silent,
Yes.
It was a silent movement, right? And with narration, but I think it's so fascinating that it's become, right, part of that. Has that influenced your work in any way?
Well, of course, the idea of ritual, the idea that theater has this element of ritual in it. So that certainly is part of it. And also, that was my first experience with the idea that there's a story structure to things, and I don't know if it's because of the religious element as much as it is the emotional element, the way you feel when you see things or you experience things or you do things in front of a group of people. I was going to say that the other amazing thing about this church was St. Peter's Church in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. It was a very modern church with sort of an open fretwork because it was the tropics. And so it was all built with concrete open fretwork. Amazing, modern 60s architecture with modern art of, Joseph and Mary and Jesus and the whole thing, but done in a very abstract manner. There's a huge mural on the outside of the church. Very, very much of its time, and very forward thinking. What they did is they took all of the excavation areas. There was a huge pit, and that they had used for all the construction materials, and they used that space after it was excavated to build a little theater. And the little theater was occupied by mostly expats, and they would put on American musicals like Annie Get Your Gun and that sort of thing. And so I got to experience all of that. Plus, my mother loved taking me to those things. She loved to dress up and go to costume parties and all that sort of thing. And I think she certainly encouraged me as an actor when I wanted to be a performing artist. She encouraged it. My father, not so much. My father was a very practical kind of guy in many ways. Very wise, but very practical. He said, perhaps, maybe you should learn to be an auto mechanic. Well, that didn't appeal to me at all, but now it appeals to me. I mean, I wish I knew more about being an auto mechanic now. They make some good money.
I mean, I think it's so fascinating that, so many theater artists, right, when they start out, they have family that's, either supportive or, concerned that they perhaps should have a little bit more of a practical bent. I went through something similar as well. With that sort of basis in sort of getting exposed to sort of the ritualized sense of performance within church. Has that influenced your work? You do mime, you do magic, you do storytelling in film. How does that sense of ritual invade your work?
Well, I think there is, even in comedy, there's a sense of the spiritual. I wouldn't necessarily call it religious, but there's an awareness that there is an other. Either it's the eye of the audience or it's the character that you're portraying or something. There's this otherness to it all. And it's a spiritual thing to identify with the imaginary, to embrace a dream and embody it. That's a spiritual experience. It doesn't happen without that spiritual element. You can't just be physical. You can't just be mental about it. There has to be emotion involved. There has to be aesthetic involved. There has to be that spiritual element to make it all sort of a gel.
Absolutely. I think you came up during this time where theater was incredibly experimental, and I think there is that sort of spirit of innovation, right, that I think sometimes I miss from the sort of daily grind of sort of producing theater, making theater. Can you talk a little bit about that? Were there specific artists or movements that you perhaps connected to in particular that sort of spoke to that sort of spiritual or ritual element?
Absolutely. My mother signed me up for a local class in mime when I was in high school. I think I was a junior. And I started taking courses in essentially basic pantomime technique. And I loved it. I loved the fact that there was this very practical thing that you could do with just your body. You didn't need anything else. You didn't need props. You didn't need language. You didn't need anything. You just had action and an idea. And I was so excited about it that I told my teachers, who at that time, they were students of a mime teacher named Sam Avital, who was out in Boulder, Colorado at the time. I said, I want to study a little bit deeper. I want to do this seriously. I'm going to go study with Sam Avital, your teacher. They said, oh, no. The person you should study with is this guy, Tony Montanaro. So I found out more about him, got an address. I wrote to him. He sent me this little tiny paper flyer. He was running a beginning mime workshop that summer. And so my parents, I was 17, I was still in high school, hadn't graduated yet. That was going to happen the next year. And so I guess I was 16. So they drove me up to Maine and dropped me off at Celebration Barn. And I remember my mother crying as she waved goodbye, and Tony was like waving at them and sinking slowly into the field in tall grass, doing a little pantomime goodbye, and and it was a real awakening. I'd never seen anyone like Tony before. He was transforming in front of us. I mean, really transforming, becoming other things, becoming animals, becoming other people, other characters. Just standing there, he would transform. And I wanted to know how he was doing that magic. You know, that kind of transformation, that kind of believable transformation was unbelievable. So slowly over time, you know, we learned the techniques. We did all kinds of drills in the morning. And this was only a 2-week session. And it totally started to mess with my perception of the world. I became obsessed. And so I went back the next summer after that. I graduated from high school. I went to the University of Missouri in Kansas City. And there, of course, we were doing, you know, Shakespeare and all the sort of traditional things. And we got to meet some working actors like Harold Gould, who was an actor's actor. But it was Tony's charisma and the way that he was able to embody and improvise that to this day, I really haven't seen anything like it. He could take your work, perform it for you, and do it better than you. And if you don't learn from seeing that happen, you're just a dullard. You know, you say, oh my God, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I know that? Why didn't I understand the depth of this? His mind was so facile and so on fire all the time. You know, what he did fully consumed him, and he fully committed to it. And he was very fearless that way. And that word fear, I think, is the one thing that holds a lot of artists back. They have all kinds of fear, and the fear manifests itself in baggage and, you know, trepidation and all kinds of other facets that sort of trip you up on your journey as an actor or a performer. And his fearlessness and his technique and his commitment to things was 100%. He never was really holding back. He was always there 100%. And so I remember the first night, every Saturday, he would have performances at the barn. At that time, he was the only person who taught there. It was just his playground. And on Saturdays, sometimes he'd show films like The Red Shoes, and, you know, the public would come from South Paris and Norway, the surrounding areas. And sometimes they would, you know, they'd bring potluck instead of paying, you know, the $1.50 to see the movie. And they would all come into the barn and they'd watch the student work. And I remember one night he asked me to stand up because we'd been working on improv technique. It took him a long time. This was in advanced workshops about 4 years into my experience working with Tony. And we'd been begging him to teach us improvisation techniques. And he kept putting it off and putting it off. And then finally, midsummer, he started teaching. This was a workshop, by the way, unlike any other workshop I've ever taken. This was a 9-month
Oh my
workshop
goodness.
where people stayed at the barn, lived at the barn, ate together at the barn, worked on material for 9 months, just eating and breathing mime and what we call today devising, right? We call it graphic work. Um, and well, graphics are different than devising. I'll explain that in a minute. But we had this Saturday night show, and he said, "We're going to do some improvisation. I'd like Leland to come up and help me out here." So my heart was going boom, boom, but I tried to be very calm, of course, on the exterior. And it was a completely cold improvisation. It's not like improv games that you see doing on theater sports or something like that. There was no, there were no safety rails, right? He simply said to the audience, he said, "Start stomping your feet." Okay, let's go, Lee. So I was listening, and the techniques were very simple. It was like, listen, don't move, do nothing until you really feel you must. Right? And then when you do it, buy it completely. Allow it to accumulate. And listen to it. Don't try to control it. Let it tell you what to do. These were sort of the basic precepts. And I still have video of that. Karen Montenero actually gave me video of that night. I'll never forget it. I have it.
Incredible. You'll have to share it with me afterwards, and then I'll add it to our footnotes as a reference if we can upload it somewhere.
Sure. It was such a big risk for a young guy at, I think it was 18, improvising with the master. You know, this sort of thing doesn't happen today. You don't have these master apprentice sort of relationships anymore. That's something that happened in the Middle Ages.
Sure, of course.
And that's and I think because of his passion, that passion sort of got translated to me and really like built the foundation of my love for theater.
I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I think back, there's always, all of us have that one person. And I think I was thinking about what you were saying about breaking past fear, that there was that one moment or that one instructor that helped us unlock that for us. For those of us who continue to pursue it as a career, I think there is that moment. For me, it was a combination of learning Grotowski and voice and speech techniques. Right. There was that moment that was that sort of synthesis of those two moments with two different instructors that kind of connected me as an actor and made me realize, oh, I can do this. And it wasn't until that moment, up until that point, I think, I'd studied Meisner, I'd studied Strasberg, I'd studied all these other things. But for my body, it just I wasn't inhabiting the character until I found my ability to do that. And so I think it's interesting that each of us have that moment that sort of like is that instructor or is that person, whether they be a master or a guru, or maybe even just a friend who introduces us to a class. And so that opens up that door. And I think that is a really great way when we come back to talk about what I want to sort of talk about next, which is innovation. How do we build that spirit again? Everyone, we've been talking to Leland Faulkner. We'll be right back with more on Forge Theater Labs. Hey there, Josh Shu here. If you've been enjoying our episodes and the stories we bring to life, there are a couple of easy ways that you can help us keep the fire burning. First, hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And if you want to take your support to the next level, you can buy us a coffee or even join our Patreon, helping us create more bold, design-forward, and innovative theater experiences. You'll find all the links on our website at forgetheaterlabs.com. Your support, whether it's a subscription, a donation, or just sharing the show with friends, makes a huge difference. Thanks for helping us forge ahead. At Forge Theater Labs, we want this podcast to be as collaborative as it was when we created it. That's where you come in. Have an idea for a future episode, a guest you'd love to hear from, or just thoughts on how we can make the show even better? Feel free to email us at info@forgetheaterlabs.com. Your voice shapes the stories we tell, so don't be shy. Let us know what you think. We've been talking to Leland Faulkner on Forge Theater Labs. I'm Josh, your host. And so Leland and I were just talking sort of a little bit about this idea of mentorship and innovation. And so I think, before we talk about sort of what a good mentorship might look like, I want to sort of kick it back to this idea of innovation. Like, what does innovation mean to you in the context of theater, right? Like, what does it mean to innovate within the form, as so many of these previous masters did, right? Like Tony Montanaro, they really sort of push the edges, push the lines so that we could sort of keep on building the form of theater. And so to you, what does that mean?
I don't know if innovation is the right word for me, but things become innovative maybe after the fact. Um, for me, everything begins with a dream, right? A sort of vision of something, and whatever I can do to make that vision come to life, I'll try or make it manifest some way. And I don't always hit the mark. I don't always, I aim for the sun. I don't always hit the sun, but something usually occurs because of that attempt or that effort. Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull, he said, if you have to meet the muse halfway. You can't expect the muse just to pop in your lap.
Yeah.
Right. You have to meet it halfway. You have to make that effort. And another way of looking at it is that if you don't make that effort, the universe doesn't rise up to support you. But if you do make the effort to try something or risk something that makes your vision come to life, somehow, somewhere, the energy, the universe, the people you're working with, your community, something will rise up to help you achieve your vision. And for example, at the time, it was not very common at all to be using video projections of any kind. Video projection was very cumbersome and very expensive. And I had a chance to do it because my friend David Leong, who ran the VCU theater department for a long time in Richmond, he approached me with an idea of doing Shadowplay, a completely devised play that was based on just Shadowplay, because he knew that I had a lot of knowledge about Shadowplay and shadow theater. And so I took that opportunity to create not just shadow, but also video projections that interacted with actors. And at that time, no one was doing that kind of work. And we did a lot of flashlight theater with flashlights on screens and actors in front of the screen interacting with them. We did a lot of work with animations and actors interacting live with animations. We created a sort of Jungian landscape for that with an actor that separated from his own shadow, fought with his own shadow, and then the shadow started to transform into different environments and worlds. And at one point, he goes underwater, and the shadow becomes a fish. And as he tries to touch it, it becomes this monstrous fish. And he tries to swim, and he swims down to the bottom of this water, and he pulls the plug, and it spins out like this. And we tried to use all these sort of Jungian archetypes to make the story, and it worked really, really well. The use of a shadow play to make a whole evening had never really been done on that level before. I think it was like 2016. I can't quite remember, but I think it was 2016. The best and most innovative part of that, I think, was that the actors started realizing that they were not just actors. They were dancers, they were mimes, they were puppeteers, they had to create choreographies, they had all these roles that up until then they would never have had a chance to do as an ensemble. Most college productions were all scripted traditional style plays where you have like maybe 5 to 6 characters, and they all interact in some sort of social structure. This wasn't like that at all. This was not literal. This was an abstract world of shadow, which could become anything. at any
Absolutely.
time.
I think that, a lot of times when we talk about innovation with theater, it really is a reminder, a callback to the idea that theater is an interdisciplinary form. Right. And that's something that resonates to me
Yeah.
is that, in all my conversations, it's always like hey, remember, theater is founded on the interweaving of different forms. And why should it be when we're trying to push it, we're trying to sort of incorporate other forms, other mediums, other ideas that lead us into new ideas, into new discussions. I'm thinking of, something that I read about a Broadway play, which is they started integrating sort of AI generated backgrounds into their performance. And,
Mhm.
however you feel about AI, that is innovative in a certain context because we are incorporating new technologies, new ideas, right? And displaying them together and seeing how they intermesh with our humanity, so to speak. And so that is something I'm very passionate about, is finding new ways to sort of to make theater even more interdisciplinary. But I do think that the experimental stuff tends to be right. It's on its sleeve, right? Like we wear that interdisciplinary elements on our sleeve. We bring that to the audience. We show it to them to engage them in a certain way. And your shadow puppets sound
Oh yeah.
just like that for its time. Um, that sounds so exciting. I can't wait to see the video of this.
Yeah, the world of mime has always been eclectic since its inception of it, I
Mhm.
suppose. Um, the original mimes were not necessarily silent. They spoke poetry.
Mhm.
They incorporated masks. They did all kinds of things. Um, they they put on animal skins. They did all kinds of
Mhm.
things. Not the specialized sort of form that people think of today as incorporeal mime or illusion pantomime. You know, by the way, just so you know, that this illusion of the wall was invented by Tony
Oh,
Montanaro,
fantastic.
and
Incredible.
yeah, and after he's the one who created what is now a cliche. See, the thing about cliches is that they were innovative and they were original at one time until they became imitated and imitated ad nauseum.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and that's what happens when something becomes popular. It becomes another animal. The uh, the mime techniques, in fact, have become an intrinsic part of hip hop and pop locking and dance today. And many of the dancers who use the techniques of isolation and separation have no idea about its
Mm.
history. Although a few do worship Robert
Yes.
Shields, and his robot.
Absolutely. I think it's really fascinating. I want to sort of jump on that idea that that the innovation once repeated too many times at a certain point can become cliche or even ingrained within our consciousness to the point where we don't recognize its history, right? And I think that's part of our mission here at Forge Theater Labs. Like that is our mission, is to sort of bring that to light, to resurface that. So I love the idea that the sort of pop and lock, the sort of different elements in the robot dance all originated in a theatrical context, right? Somebody else took it from a different
Yes.
medium and went, you know what, I'm going to borrow that, take that, and make that my own. And that I think is at the heart of innovation, right? That's what keeps us moving forward.
Yeah, it's a transformation of something that grabs you, either grabs your imagination, grabs your spirit, and and so you have to imbibe it somehow. And whenever you do that, it goes through that filter of you and becomes something different, something new, something other than what it was. Um, I've blended. I've Mine is very eclectic. It
Mhm.
always has been. So I blend a lot of different techniques into what I do. Um, But at the heart of it, the very, very heart of it, is the physicality, the mime and the movement. Even if I do amazing, magic tricks, or if I do a shadow play, at the heart of it is the physicality of what's happening, either of the characters or of the action. In the physicality is the most basic communication, with either by communicating the plot or by interacting with the audience. That physical movement, that physical action is the key. It's the foundation, in my opinion, of performance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of and I think mime in particular lends itself, right, in the importance of balancing clarity with experimentation, right? There is something about, the recognition of the physical movement, even in an abstract context, that there is this plot that's being presented. There is this sort of story that's at the heart of this experimentation that we're seeing. And I think that's something wonderful that we've seen would rebalance experimentation and clarity. I think that's something that, it's not always the case, but I find that sometimes I have done shows where I've probably gone off the deep end a little bit, and an audience member went away and be like, "What happened there?" But you don't really hear that when it comes to mime too often. You hear, "That was incredible, the physicality, the experimentation, but I got the story," right? I think that is something unique to it. You were about to say.
Yeah, well, Keith Johnstone came to my mind.
Mm.
He's and the reason that he did is because he told me once that, Leland, the audience, they're just waiting. They're waiting for the actor to transform. And I realized, when he told me that's really, really, really true. They're waiting to see that transformation occur in that actor, in that performance. If it doesn't occur, somehow they're very disappointed.
I think that's absolutely true. I think, in an age of celebrity, of personality, right? I think that's something that theater can offer, is that if we don't have celebrities, if we don't have that, we still have that sort of spirit of transformation, or at least, right, sort of, right, getting the audience to buy into our illusion. Have you ever recognized, and this is a good question, just because, I typically work with intimate audiences. Have you ever recognized when the audience isn't buying in, right? Like, you're in front of that audience. You can see that skeptic sitting in row 3, seat A3, just saying to you, no, like arms crossed. Like, what is your reaction in that moment? Because I have found, I have my own sort of opinions, but I have found that I am actually working extra hard the moment I see that happen.
I guess I have a very thick skin, like a rhino, having been through almost every situation you can imagine. If you don't fail, first of all, you're not doing it right. And you're not growing. And you're not really risking anything. And when you do fail, you learn an immeasurable amount. You know what road not to go down. You know how to build towards something that works with an audience. If you don't fail, you're just treading water. You're just treading water. You're not going anywhere. So
Of course.
Mostly in my younger years, I've had that happen, but occasionally I work as my daughter went to the school system here, and so occasionally I'll work as a substitute teacher, and and the hardest audiences are 6th grade as a substitute teacher. I mean, I think of substitute teaching as sort of a performance as well, but they also don't lie. Right? So if I do a little magic trick, they will swarm me. And I have to be very careful about when I do it, because they'll be asking for more. And if I make the mistake of falling into that trap, they will grab my hands, put their hands in my pocket, whatever it is, to try and figure out how I created the illusion for them, and ruin it, and the whole thing would fall flat.
Yeah.
So I know not to go down that path because I've been down that path once, right? And it's the same in performing and creating material. You have to risk and you have to fail. You have to, but you don't want to be doing it on opening night when the critics are there. Right? It's what you do in studio, in the devising, improvising, and creative process. You fail as much as you possibly can, or at least I do. I try to take things in every possible direction I can. I try to find out every bit of articulation that I can. I try to explore the boundary of things, and then I can bring it back. Then I can bring it into a performable realm.
I think that's so important, right? Is that we often hear this sort of like this maxim, oh, you must fail in order to succeed. And then, what does that mean? It doesn't mean in performance, right? We never want to fail in performance. We want to fail in the rehearsal room. We want to make bad choices. We want to make strange choices. We want to figure out that stuff in the rehearsal room. And so that rehearsal hall, that experimentation, that spirit needs to be there before we get to go on and put on our Broadway shoes, right? I think that is a really great point. And I think the parallel between teaching and performance is absolutely true. I have been a teacher for over 20 years, and I can say that is very much, right, a performance at all times, right? Yeah. Even if you're teaching performance, it is a performance in itself. Absolutely. And sort of understanding, okay, what techniques worked, what techniques didn't work when conveying students, and that students are different, audiences are different every single time you go through. I think those are all wonderful points.
Yeah, here's something I want to say about teaching too, is that pedagogy can be a trap. Rubrics can be a trap. These need to be sort of flexible structures. Perfect example, I just finished a residency at a high school in Boston on filmmaking. And I worked with the media department there, and I taught filmmaking techniques like lighting and camera movement to that class. And then they cast drama students, and they wrote their own scripts. Okay, this is where experience comes into play. The scripts that they gave me were horror films where people die in horrible ways, stabbed to death, or beaten to death, or something like that. Well, that kind of thing isn't going to fly with the administration at a high school who doesn't want to promote violence in their school. So what do you do? First of all, I took the scripts and I rewrote the scripts, but I kept the essence of it and took out all the death.
Understandably.
And the first script was, this kid is in a locker room, and some guy comes into the locker room, and I asked, what's the script? Well, it was like really 3 paragraphs. And they said, kid's in the locker room, guy comes into the locker room, attacks him, stabs him, and he dies. He just dies? He's like bleeding out on the floor. Yeah. Okay. Well, why? Oh, well, they hadn't thought about that. Is it someone who's jealous? Is it, and they were going, oh, well, I don't know. Is it supernatural? They go, that's it. It's supernatural. It was supernatural. Oh, okay. So now I had something to hang my hat on, right, from their idea. So I went back and I rewrote that. And the other script was written by the drama students. And it too was a horror script. And that script was kids sneak into the high school after hours and they hold a seance. And one of them gets possessed and kills one of the other students. Of course. And so,
of course.
So I got rid of the death in that scenario too, and I decided that the best thing to do was to take the two scripts, blend them into a single script where the locker room becomes like an intrinsic scene in the middle of so it has high action in the middle, which is the culmination of this kid getting possessed. And so we shot everything, we shot the kids sneaking into the school, and I had them hold up like they came into a blacked out auditorium, and they all had their phone lights on. And so we actually used the phone lights to illuminate each of the actors, a little additional light as well. But I thought it was really beautiful cinematography once it was done. And I was teaching the kids how to do cinematography, how to do camera work, how to move a camera, how to create angles, all of those elements. And the final product of it was pretty astounding. We were able to have drone shots of the high school because one of the students had a drone. And so it looked really, really nice. Visually, it was really, really nice. And it all came together. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to create sort of an outreach into the community as a teacher, and have the student work be seen by other students, have it be seen by the parents, etc. And so I proposed a film festival. And then they told me, oh, well, the art department, they're having like a gallery showing, and they're combining it with the music students, and they're going to have this performance in the auditorium. And I said, well, we need a film festival. Can our film festival be part of this event? And so it happened like that. The students got validated for their work, and were blown away by how good they looked and how well they came off and how the story came together. Now, a teacher, I felt pretty invisible at the end of it, right? Because it was, I felt almost invisible at the end of it, which is great. But the experience for them was validating. One girl was such a good actor. She didn't even know how good she was. And she was thrown into the role at the last moment. I'd actually cast her in the crew as a stunt director. And I was going to show them the choreography, and she was going to direct the choreography for the stunt, which was a fight scene where someone gets a towel wrapped around their neck and gets dragged down a hallway and knocked out. But they don't die.
I really do think that in terms of theater education, in terms of film education, art education, right?
Yeah.
In the past, you and I came from a generation of gurus, masters, right? And some of them were horribly cruel. Some of them were invalidating. And sort of to hear that sort of transformation, that what we took away is that the next generation of theater makers, what we need to do to inspire them is to validate their art and to show them that pathway to that next level. I've been talking to Leland Faulkner. This is Josh from Forge Theater Labs. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll keep on talking about how we inspire the next generation of theater makers. Be right back. Want to get your brand in front of a passionate, creative, and engaged audience? Forge Theater Labs is looking for partners to sponsor this podcast and join us in bringing bold, innovative theater to life. If you'd like to place an ad right here, reach out to us at marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. It's a simple, powerful way to support the arts while sharing your message with listeners who care about creativity and community. Again, that's marketing@forgetheaterlabs.com. Let's build something extraordinary together. Welcome back, everyone. I've been talking to Leland Faulkner about experimentation, about mentorship within theater making. And so to sort of pick up where we left off, you've taught and mentored a wide range of students. What do you hope the next generation of theater makers, theater instructors, theater students right, heads. So like, where do you imagine them going?
Well, I'm pretty sure 90% of them will probably head, if they want to be professionals, into some sort of media world, because that seems to be the wave. But I hope that the love for live performance is the one thing that they walk away with and that they return to. Nothing validates the process more than a live audience. It's a living, breathing organism that for some reason chooses to dream with you. And what other art form can do that in real time? Film can't do that. Video can't do that. Painting doesn't do that. Poetry, if it's being spoken, can do that. But live performance does that. It's a living art form. And the audience is part of that art form. It's a living part of it. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with you. I think that's sort of the reminder always when we think about innovating theater is how we engage with our audience. What are the ways that we're connecting with our audience? Because that is the thing that makes us special. We draw from film, we draw from dance, we draw from all these different mediums. But the one thing that makes theater especially powerful is that sort of connection with the audience, whether we're asking them to suspend their belief for 2.5 hours or whether it is to directly engage with us in that performance, for in terms of improvisation or anything like that. I think, doing that. So my question to you would be then, how would you innovate our relationships with the audience? What are ways that you think, or perhaps call back to bring back sort of certain relationships with audience?
Well, I think what I call graphic figuration is a sort of lost art form. When I first came to Maine to study with Tony Montanaro, there was this ensemble he had of very, very physical mime actors. They performed at places like the Open Eye in New York, and they got a Beatles Foundation grant to do a version of Rocky Raccoon, all using physicality. And they used their bodies to become everything in a scene, everything from kids sitting around a campfire, their feet would become the fire, to a rainstorm, to everything. And it wasn't linear, and it wasn't abstract. It was impressionist. And the sort of impressionistic approach to creating physical theater is something that you don't see at all anymore. On rare occasions, I've seen some dance groups kind of approach it, but it's not something that's done as a general theatrical form at all. And I think that it's due for a huge comeback. And
I agree. I am excited to see it come back.
Yeah, when I teach workshops in mime and movement, that's one of the things I love to focus on is graphic figurations, where the actors become everything in a scene, or as an ensemble, they become everything. So all the inanimate objects, all the atmospheres, they become it all.
Incredible. I'm just imagining, instead of having a scenic designer, you have a graphic figuration designer,
Yes.
right? You have somebody who's in the room as a designer building that collaborative process, not just the director, not just the actors, but to have someone within that role that embodies, obviously we call them movement coaches, but to someone who isn't just a movement coach or someone helping physicality, but actually designing that physicality,
Yeah.
I think is incredible, beyond just choreography or anything like that, but that it actually becomes part of that scenery. That is setting my brain on fire. So I'm going to take a moment to breathe because I could just imagine that within the context of a production room. In terms of mentorship, right?
Yeah.
Obviously we don't have this sort of master relationship, but we do have sort of more apprenticeships that are available now across the country as a result. And obviously sort of validating these students, which we mentioned before, is a central part. what are the different ways that you sort of imagine that we can sort of better mentor the next generation of theater makers?
Well, I learned a lot about teaching from my mentors and the artists who taught me. You know, people like Tony, Barry Rolfe, who was the protege of Jacques Lecoq himself, and all the different artists that I've worked with, who really had an effect on their students, did this one thing that here, let me explain it this way: a teacher who is in that position of being a mentor or a guide or a master can make or break an artist. They can destroy that person's will to continue in the art form, or they can light a fire in them. And I've seen both happen. I know a girl who was told by her acting teacher in college that she should just quit because she was too fat. And so she never approached it again, even though she loved it. She became a business manager for theater companies and was incredibly funny and incredibly good, but never would walk on stage. And I know that without the guidance of someone like Tony, I never would have been willing to take the risks to make things happen in my life theatrically that I have. You know, for myself, for my one-man shows, I create multiple one-man shows, and I never would have had that ability to dream that way and to manifest those shows without him saying, "Good, go that direction. That's your voice. Do it. That's your personal style. Do it. Embrace your personal style." I had a passion for magic. And when I was a young boy, I met a great magician. His name was John Calvert. And I've been able to incorporate magic from that inspiration that I got from watching his performance into my shows. And I love those little elements because they surprise and engage an audience. They are not necessarily the be-all and end-all of my performance, but they're the effects create those little moments of wonder and mystery that hold an audience in the story or in the performance, and they're like glue. And I have to tell you a little small side story is that this man, John Calvert, 40 years after I saw him perform as a 10-year-old boy in Africa, I met him again in Boston. The man was in his 90s, and he came out on stage and performed, and he was magnificent. He was amazing. He was charismatic. He had an incredible theatrical voice. He actually was a Hollywood movie actor, a B-movie actor in the 50s. He had a series of spy films that came out when they used to have two-reelers. Mm-hmm. And he took me under his wing in my 30s and taught me his favorite illusion, which was sawing off a head as a mad doctor with an illusion that he had built. And I performed that with him in Las Vegas a couple of times. And then I performed it in my show, Dark Tales, that I toured with this ensemble for a while. And it was always an incredible success. But the most successful moment for me with that was when I was able to perform it at a huge magic conference in New York City for his 100th birthday. He was 100 years old, and I was able to reconstruct it the way that he performed it, and I made it even better, I'm proud to say. And that was probably one of the biggest examples of coming full circle with a mentor, with a master, and one of the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life. And a good mentor can do that. They can elevate the mentee they can make them larger than life. They can make them larger than themselves. And they can teach them how to be that way. You know, that was one of the things that Barry Rolfe taught me, is that when we're on stage, we are larger than life. We have to be aware of that. When you work with neutral mask, for example, you become suddenly aware of how important the physical presence is on stage.
And the same is true of teaching.
Yeah.
I love that point, which is, as much as we need to be alive on stage, we need to be on point, recognizing our effects on our mentees, and also inspiring them to be the next generation of mentors, right? That's how we continue the innovation, continue building upon that. We're almost at the end of our time today. So I just want to ask you, what's next for you this fall?
Well, I'm in the throes of developing, still creating, and evolving things organically for my one-man show, Dreamcatcher, which is one of the most important pieces in my repertoire. I rely on my Native American heritage, so I've gone into my Chippewa heritage and worked with other story keepers around the country. And I've created a performance of traditional Native American stories. And I'm incorporating lighting and projection, but also just straight storytelling. So this thing can scale from performing without any props at all, just storytelling, to doing a full-scale performance with rear projection. And I have a large 8-foot Dreamcatcher on stage. And so I can do it with production, without production. It's going to be it is a totally flexible performance that can adapt to almost any situation. And
where can our audience check this out? Where can they see this eventually? Do you know yet?
I don't know yet. I have a representation, which is, they're taking it around to all the showcases around the country, Northwest and all of those national showcases. And of course, I'm also I perform a lot in public schools in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Virginia and Florida and all over. So I have a version of it which is very low tech that I take to the schools, and I find that incredibly enjoyable. Most kids haven't experienced story theater, and I find that very satisfying. And I think that's also inspiring them to see that, theater has some magic still. Theater is a magical art form. And I hope maybe, some kids are inspired enough to take a shot at trying their hand at creating something theatrical. So.
And on that note, I think that's a wonderful place to end. Leland, you'll have to share with us when we can catch this. We'll make sure to put it on our website and our socials. Please check out the show notes. We'll include all the links that we just talked about. Thank you so much, Leland.
Thank you, Joshua. I had a great time.
Forge Theater Labs is produced by Josh Shue. Audio production by Sam Rappaport. Intro drum beat by Dave Register. Incidental music by Super Order. And closing music by Corey Melanson.